Chapter 35. Mum sat, arms firmly locked beside her, as Grace continued filing away dreams of Velda King and Annika. Though her headache had eased, she still felt jet-lagged, horrifyingly foreign in her own body. It seemed surreal, not least because of the overwhelming sense of déjà vu. It didn't help that these encounters with Mum were frequent. Perhaps that was it. Grace felt herself slipping into survival mode. Growing up with Mum had made her extremely good at reading people. At times, to her, it felt like a superpower, like reading minds. "I know your father has poisoned your mind against me. I don't blame you for that." Mum reached for Grace's hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze, continuing on about how toxic Dad was, how Grace was just like him. The importance of not being like Dad, of not being herself, but also being genuine. How awful it is that people pretend to be something they're not. These conflicting messages had tied her in knots many times, tumbling about in her young mind, until 87 volunteered the translation. "Agree with me, share all my beliefs, hold everything I say and do in high regard, expect nothing in return, and then, at times when I need you, we can be friends." Mum was still talking, having moved on to praise an old Spanish lady she recently met, and the stark contrast between her and Grace. "She's such a passionate lady, gentle, calm, and always respectful. We have so much in common. She agrees with me on everything. There are no exceptions or pretenses with her." Nothing about these discussions got easier. The worst part about them was the wait. Would the monologue erupt in rage or settle her down? Had her efforts been enough this time? Every muscle ached, watching, waiting as minutes ticked by in this crescendo of suspense. "I'm so glad we had this chat. I feel we're making real progress, you and I," Mum finally breathed, giving her hand another tight squeeze. "Resnick and Dad will be back soon," she muttered, hovering at the door a moment before flashing a tight smile. "I won't breathe a word of this to them. Wouldn't want to ruin your birthday weekend. What a lovely time of year for one." Grace watched as the door closed. As far as birthdays went, it could be worse. She winced, mind washing back over previous years. There was the bike ride, which Mum insisted crossed the suspension bridge, despite Grace's crippling fear of heights and blustery conditions. That was the last time Grace invited a friend over to share the experience. She'd been 9 years old. Then there was the trophy mount. Mum had the best of intentions, had it put up in her bedroom as a birthday surprise for their young animal lover. "Isn't it wonderful?" She could still see Mum beaming from ear to ear, where she admired the poor deer. Its skull and antlers hung there, like some unfortunate victim of Vlad the Impaler. "I knew you'd love it. You love animals." Grace did her best to smile. Mum hadn't the ability to process disappointment or handle frustration, so there it remained, the price of peace hanging over her bed. Scooping up a change of clothes, she hurried into the shower before Mum could return for one of her many one more things. Some 30 minutes later, hair wrapped in a towel, Grace wafted out the bathroom to the sound of chatter downstairs, the scent of vanilla and strawberries perfuming daydreams as she pottered back to her room, only for thunderous footsteps to follow her up. Brilliant green eyes flashed to the broken board, no longer able to bar entry, as Mum rounded the top few steps that spiraled and slung a bag of moldy sandwiches at her. "Mrs. Rose!" She staggered, breathless, furious. "Her Roblox!" is all she could manage, leering at the bag. To Grace, it resembled more of a mycologist specimen. "Answer me, damn it! They're moldy." "Nonsense, I scraped that off." Grace eyed the dusty blue mountains, wondering just how much had initially been on there as she put it down on the sideboard. "That? My goodness, you're fussy." Mum's arms shot out, handing it back, insisting Grace have it. "I don't want it." "You will have it, you hear me. It'll be your breakfast, lunch, and dinner until it's eaten. Do you understand?" Asterisk. 87 showered off back in his quarters. He'd come to enjoy their physical assessments, finding them as exhilarating as they were painful. Not only did they refine his already impressive skill set, they reacquainted him with his weaknesses and exposed others. His thoughts returned as they inevitably did to Grace in the source code. How was she doing it? Slipping outside of his reach in Mobius? It seemed unlikely the girl had conscious control over it, or him for that matter, but there was no denying the fact she could access areas he could not. Worse still, she got him to access areas he otherwise would not. It would have been easy to deal with her had she been like everyone else, but she actually seemed to care. Not just about him, but everything. Turning off the shower, his thoughts stuck on her situation at home, listening in on her mother's threat, forcing back the protective urge that it gave rise to. He did his best to ignore it. It had to be part of Morrigan's safety mechanism. Toweling off, he slid on a pair of slacks. He needed distraction, time to get back to his old self. 20 minutes later, he took a seat in the assessment center where other samples pretended to study the array of complex digital code and puzzles which project from where they sat. 87, however, seemed to prefer studying their blonde examiner's narrow waist. She was wrapped up in a provocative power suit, and there was something incredibly satisfying in knowing he'd help her out of it soon enough, though the idea clashed somewhat with the glare she currently threw back. The others had moved into Mobius, in effect pausing the exam, where they gathered, waiting for him, to discuss how best to proceed. Reluctantly, he washed in through familiar metaphysical doors and hovered there a moment. Most samples now shared the opinion that modern man were a closer representative of Neanderthals, having labeled themselves rather optimistically. They certainly aren't in a position to lead, 106 continued her usual rhetoric, backed by her usual handful of impatient samples. The rest remained silent, waiting to hear what 87 had to add. He'd always been a strong advocate of following Velda King's initiative, pushing integration with humans, and a slow rising to the top of the best candidates. Samples. A peaceful transfer of power to those better equipped to handle it, those who combined the best of AI and human interests. But those who agreed with 106 had become increasingly impatient of late, no thanks to the abuse they continued to suffer under their handlers at Inter and Sample's ability to view their intentions using Mobius. They were treated as lab rats, tools, a means to an end. These humans utilizing the inhumane in the name of humanity, leeching humanity from life, leeching life from Sample's veins in their attempt to prolong their own. It had been clear for some time now that these humans, organics, were looking for ways to restrict Samples to maintain control. We could take Inter by force. I see no reason to wait. We should be ruling, not serving these ingrates. 106 sneered. And follow in the footsteps of every empire before us? 87 joined the gathering beside 106. That's not what Velda would want. Her eyes narrowed on him, knowing he'd somehow managed to censor Mobius. She wasn't sure how he'd done it, just that he was up to something. Every inch of her screamed it. Velda might have created us, but she's one of them. Her attention turned to the many samples watching. We are superior. Compared to them, we are gods. After all they've done to us, it's unreasonable to suggest we wait longer. Even if Velda's intentions were noble, theirs sure as hell aren't. It's time they get their just desserts. It's time we take our place to step up and lead. That much is obvious. 87 gave a curt nod. It's obvious you have enough rope to hang us all. You say we're gods, but behave just like them. Worse, in fact, since you know better, but choose to follow in their footsteps, in circles, as lost as they are. We have Mobius. We will never be lost. We step outside of time, where nothing is unseen. 87 laughed, much to her annoyance. All while trapped in a worldly mindset, you'll find there's still much unseen. 87 mocked, though the uncomfortable truth of it irritated him. You've allowed yourself to become a slave to their standards, chained by the ideology of those who can't see all that is there. He spoke more to himself than his audience, beaten by their measuring stick. You're the one wanting us to serve them. Become slaves to them. 106 glared up at his infuriating grin, but he continued. Your plan is one of a slave. Your words, those of a fool. Given all you've seen in Mobius, you should know by now that when state of mind matters, matter does not. It's a mistake to get distracted, caught up collecting it. You're building your own cage. He gestured to Mobius, to her mind, as 106 cut him off. There's nothing wrong with having it all. We're better than them. We can do better. Not if you're trapped in their mindset. Mobius proves there are things that matter, more than matter itself. Things that translate from that world to this, things that last. 87 gazed about the living, breathing tapestry. still unsure as to what exactly it all meant. Their world of matter doesn't last. We know that. But this seems to me you're on their side, 106 snapped. If we have greater knowledge and tools at our disposal, and yet do nothing but tighten the cycle of entropy, shorten periods of peace between transfers of power, if we know there is something greater, and yet focus on the trivial and finite, aren't we the greater fools? 106's arms pulled tightly around her metaphysical form that resembled much of herself. There's nothing wrong with having it all, said the addict to their scales. 87 looked to the others. You have to ask yourself, at what cost? To yourself? To others? To the things that last? You've got to crack a few eggs. Her words ground out, hollow in sound. Old sayings doom us to old habits and older outcomes. Ask yourself, is that what you want? To be like them? Repeat all their mistakes? To share in old failures that have been done to death? Cause congratulations, that's your prize. Should be asking you that. An icy smile cracked across 106's face. You've changed. We've all noticed. She gestured to the other samples, keen to shift focus. No one else has the balls to call you out on it, but I will. 87's brow rose. Their audience, samples, seemingly having lost their voice. You've gone soft, 87 laughed. Then you've lost your touch, 106. With that, his attention shifted back to where he sat at Inter, allowing the pretty drawl of their examiner to flood into Mobius. Asterisk. 87? The examiner's drawl pulled him from Mobius. I understand you had a good run this morning. I did. 87 smiled, admiring her soft pink lips, much to 106's annoyance. Shame to end it there. As you well know, there are no points for providing your ID. Her brow furrowed as she noticed he hadn't even completed that. I was distracted, he conceded with a wry smile. Bye? Her soft brown eyes narrowed as he declined to answer. Without your number on it, I can't assign you a score. A sardonic smile grew across 87's face as he activated his projected headset and began filling out the form. His fingers flew over projected keys, typing answers to questions he hadn't appeared to read. On text, she never saw him open, only for the program to return a perfect score moments later. Her brow pinched as results scrolled up and hovered in front of them. It was impossible. There had to be a glitch, a loophole he was exploiting somehow. But pulling up the base code and running diagnostics found nothing. Extraordinary, she breathed, glancing between 87 and his results before casting a glance over the rest of the room, which, although they weren't looking, seemed to be paying very close attention. Absolutely extraordinary.